and this is in 1887. So he took a train to Spokane, he took a coach from Spokane to Loomis, and for those of you, Loomis is north of Conconelli, over on the Okanagan side. He rented a horse, and he went up to Chipaka Mountain. He met up with two of his friends in Loomis, and they harvested 2 rams on Chipaka Mountain. We have bighorn sheep on Chipaka Mountain today, but he harvested 2 rams, and then he went up to British Columbia, forget the name. There you go. No, it's yeah, there's a certain spot, but yeah, it's Ashnola.
Perfect.
And he harvested 12 rams, 3 ewes, and 1 lamb because he wanted the family group. He had to get a lamb. He wanted the family group. But on his way in to harvest these rams, to harvest these sheep, he met a Canadian from Victoria coming out who had 9 rams that he was bringing home. So basically in a couple weeks, they harvested a lot of rams out of one herd. And so back in the day, unregulated hunting definitely had an impact on our bighorn sheep herds. And because of that, and because when the settlers came through, they brought with them their domestic sheep and goats. Domestic sheep and goats transmit pneumonia into our herds. Domestic sheep and goat live with pneumonia. They're carriers of it. But when it gets into a bighorn sheep herd, it can decimate the herd. On average, it takes out 90% of the herd. So this unregulated hunting, and with the introduction of this new disease coming through at the turn of the century, our sheep were extirpated throughout the entire state of Washington, including Okanagan County. And that's the reason that the Auduboni subspecies went extinct as well. So in Okanagan, the herds that we have the Mount Hull herd, which is here. So this is the Winthrop Valley, and then this is the Okanagan River coming up here. So just south of Oroville, we have Mount Hull herd. We have the Sinlahecan herd over in the Sinlahecan Valley. We have the Omak Lake herd, which is actually on the Colville Indian Reservation. The Hell's Gate Reserve, which is in southern Ferry County, but in the Colville Indian Reservation. And the Bosso Lake herd in British Columbia. And the Manson herd in Chelan, and the Chelan Butte herd in Chelan as well. Kind of a quick side note, the Chelan Butte herd is growing to the point where it's coming up into southern Okanagan County. And right before the BB Bridge, there's kind of that fish hatchery. Yeah, many of you have seen the sheep there. That's the Chelan Butte herd. And they're kind of expanding their range a little northward up the Columbia River. And we're not sure how far they're going to come up. There's a lot of good habitat in there.
Can you say how big each herd is? How many?
I'm getting there. Just jumping the gun. Thank you. So I'll go through each herd a little bit. So the Sinlahecan herd is incredibly important to the history of our state, history of bighorn sheep reintroduction. So again, in 1935 we had no bighorn sheep known in the state of Washington. In 1957, the agency brought 18 bighorn sheep from Williams Lake, British Columbia, which in all of the West, this was one of the last strongholds for bighorn sheep, California bighorn sheep. So we brought them in, and they put them in a 500-acre pen. From 1957, they grew until the late 60s when they were able to start seeding other places in the state from the Sinlahecan herd. So this herd actually fathered a lot of herds throughout the state. We, in subsequent years, like in 2001, we introduced some from John Day, Oregon. In the 96, we took some from Kamloops into Sinlahecan, and that was to boost the genetics, to boost the genetic diversity of the herd. This is actually a picture of the Sinlahecan herd. So we took them in, and as they grew, like I said, we augmented and created, not augmented, we created additional herds throughout the state from the Sinlahecan. So a little bit about the management. They're managed by us, Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife, managed to ensure a healthy and productive population. That's one of our primary goals. They're managed for recreational hunting and viewing. They are highly viewable, highly visible. The town of town of Loomis, rough, did I say rough? So, the town of Loomis has actually taken them as their unofficial symbol. And you can go to the Quickie Mart and buy Loomis with a bighorn sheep ram lapel on it. So they really do like their sheep, and they can be seen in town on Main Street often, actually. I've seen them laying in people's yards. So they're managed for recreational hunting, but we do not have a permit on the herd at this point. So what happened? Kind of short history. In '57 to the late '60s, they grew well. They got up to about 80, 90 animals throughout the '70s, into the '80s. So their high population estimates were 80 to 90 animals. And then in the early '90s, the population took a dramatic decline. And we're not quite sure, but we suspect it was a pneumonia outbreak. Over the years, the course of the population growth kind of mimicked exactly what a pneumonia decline or a pneumonia outbreak would do to a herd. And so it took until the mid-2000s for the herd to get back up again. And in 2009, we were back up to 80, 90 animals, and so we offered up a permit. And then, so 2009, 2002, 2011, we're at 80, 90 animals. It's doing great. We're really proud of the herd. Everything's going well. And then we started up the surveys in 2012, and we're not seeing sheep anymore. And so now we're back down to 40, 45 animals. We do not have a permit, and we don't know what happened. We don't know if it was a pneumonia outbreak. If it was a pneumonia outbreak, or any disease outbreak, the sheep being so visible to so many residents around Loomis and the surrounding areas, that we would have had a report of carcasses, several carcasses, and we didn't get reports of hardly any carcasses over the last 2 years. So we're at a little bit of a loss of what's going on. So some of the other challenges with this herd. In the Sinleakin Valley, there's a limited amount of winter range for the sheep, and you can see the forest encroachment. So this photo was taken in 1910, this one in 2006. And you can see, there's not as much forest in this photo, allowing more grass, allowing the sheep access to more grass than in this photo. And again, that tree cover is gonna block their view of that escape terrain. If they can't see that escape terrain, they don't feel comfortable going out into that area. So they have to be able to see and be able to utilize their escape terrain. Here's downtown Loomis with the sheep. Downtown, it's a metropolis, isn't it? So we've had roadkill. So here's a Spectacle Lake ram. It got struck by a car and ended up in the lake. And let me tell you, that's where I made my money that day, dragging him out. And then we have domestics, of course. Most all the herds throughout the state have some degree of domestics close by, and again, it's the risk of disease transmission into the herd. Domestic dogs are always a problem in most all of our herds. They like to chase sheep, and that's just never good. So some things that we're doing, the wildlife area staff it's been about 5 years now, they've started this thinning and burning project throughout the Sinleakin, which is, again, allowing that visibility from the cliff face further out so they can utilize more of the grasses and forbs. And of course, by thinning and burning, you're creating more grass and forbs as well. And so it's allowing more forage for the herd. So this is ongoing. They've thinned and burned over 2,000 acres in the Sinleakin Valley, and they're continuing to do more. It's a very positive step for our bighorn sheep. So I'm hopeful that this will prove many benefits in the next few years. When we started the thinning and burning project, Washington State University came in with a grad student to collar some sheep and see what the response was to this thinning and burning. And so we conducted an aerial capture, which was actually quite a hoot. And we collared 21 sheep over 2 years. We did a capture in 2010, we did a capture in 2011. And just some of the graduate student is still writing up, so I don't have too many results to share. But this is basically a core use area of one of the sheep, one of the radio collars. The radio collars these days are pretty sophisticated. They run through the satellites, so we're getting GPS locations, very accurate GPS locations each and every day. So, so basically the light colors, the yellows and the reds there, are their core areas. That's where they use most. The bluish purple is a peripheral range. They use it, but they don't use it as much as these core areas. And the same here with the whites and blues compared to the black. So even though I don't know the results of how they're utilizing the thinned and burned areas, we did get a good estimate of where they're ranging, what habitats they're using, which has proven good in our surveying. It's made our surveying much more accurate.
How large of an area is that?
That's a good question.
It says on the bottom there.
What was the question?
Yeah, it's kind of, 4,000 meters.
4 clicks, 4 kilometers, 3 miles.
I think it's about 4 or 5K up and down. Yeah, because from here to down to Loomis, it's about 5-6 miles. So this is Palmer Lake. These are the slopes. So the town of Loomis sits right there, right in a core area. So one of the downsides that we discovered with our herd, and potentially one of the reasons for the decline, was in the capture. So we captured in 2010, we captured in 2011. In 2011, we actually identified the Shropti's mange, Shropti's mite, and the sheep that we were capturing had very crusty ears, and when we sampled that, put it under a microscope, we came up with a mange. This ram right here is actually up in the Ashinola. It's in British Columbia, and it has Shropti mange. And they found it 1 month before we identified ours. And they actually euthanized the sheep and tested it. We tested based on our captures. Mange basically removes the hair, but it affects each individual differently. And I have not noticed any of our sheep with this type of hair loss to date. But I have noticed that it affects our lamb crop, and you'll see that the hair is missing around the horns on the lambs. With that, we've seen poor lamb reproduction since 2011. So we're thinking that this mite is having an effect on our lambs. We don't believe it affected the adults as badly. And one thing about this mite was controlled in domestics in 1927. They were able to eradicate this from domestics. We don't know where it came from. This guy was the very first time it was ever reported in British Columbia. We've never had it in Okanagan. We've had it down in the southwest in the Hells Canyon area, but never up here. So moving on to the Mount Hull herd, just below Oroville. In 1970, we transported 7 bighorn sheep from the Yakima area, the Quillamine herd. And then we also augmented throughout the years from Kamloops in '96 and John Day in 2001. And this herd has only been used to augment the Hell's Gate Reserve herd, which was just established 3-4 years ago. So Mount Hull, this is a great herd. It's actually co-managed by the Colville tribe. Basically, what that means is we both manage the herd. When we put up our number of permits, they match it with their number of permits. And so when we're going through our calculations of how many sheep we can offer in permits, we always know that they're going to match it. And so we cut ours in half, and they match. So it's actually working out pretty good, and the herd is thriving at this point. The Colvilles have also chipped in with radio collars on the herd as well. So it's a good co-management. And again, they're managed to ensure a healthy, productive population. I got a good count on them. The week before Christmas, there was about 90 individuals. I know I missed 20 rams from my ram count the year before. So there's about 110, 120 animals in the herd. They are managed for harvest and for viewing. And these guys come down to Highway 97 sometimes, and they are highly visible. And a lot of people pull over to the side of the road to take a look at them. So the hunters, bighorn sheep hunters, are great. They are a very unique and dynamic set of hunters, and they are very, very passionate about their sheep. And so you have to put in for these permits, and you have to build up points, and you get 1 point a year, and on average it takes 12 years to draw out of the Mount Hull herd. So they're putting in for 12 years to get a chance to harvest. And so when they harvest one, they spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and they really do try and take a trophy animal. And so then the rules and regulations say that they have to have that horn marked by us. These horns, basically that's to prevent the horn from going onto the black market. So when you have a very passionate hunter, and he's just harvested a trophy animal, he's had probably the best hunt of his life. And here I am, biologist, don't know this guy, and I'm coming up and I say, I need to pin your, he has to bring it in to me for pinning. And I go, I need your ram to pin it. And I pull out a power drill. And I tell you, those guys are a little freaked out at that point. And I will say, I have not messed up anybody's trophy yet. So what we do is we put a little, looks like a little skinny oversized nail, and basically we glue it into the horn. And one of these horns actually has the drill hole in it. The only thing you have to be careful about is that you don't drill it and glue it into the bone core of the horn. And if you do that, the taxidermist cannot remove the horn and dry the skull properly. So as long as I do that, I'm good. And so far, like I said, I haven't messed any up. And I am very patient, I am very, very slow, and I explain every step I do, and I've had no hunter get mad yet. So. But it's kind of fun when I pull out the power drill. So a few challenges on Mount Hull. Again, we starting in 2003, we kind of had a...
Hey, that's rough.
Rough, I tell you.
Rough, dude.
You gotta line up.
Okay.
There you go. Sorry about that. Rough. My wife was right. Okay. So anyway, in 2003 we started having an uptick in roadkill on State Highway 97. That's not exactly a good thing for the herd or for the motorists. And so this. Where's mine? So this mirror actually belongs to the superintendent of Okanagan County's DOT, Department of Transportation. So he pulled over because he got blocked by the herd, but he had a semi coming up behind him, and he thought that this was such a great picture, he had to call me into his office. So in 2003 to 2007, we were losing about four sheep a year on the highway. And since 2008, there's only one that I know about to date. So we've taken a proactive approach and tried to rectify it. Another issue, this is an apple orchard at the base of Mount Hull, and the sheep literally funnel down this area. They were funneling into this apple orchard. It was not fenced. And this browse line that you see is all from sheep. And they were coming in, eating what they, they'd get up on their hind legs and as high as they could reach. They'd eat the apples, the leaves, and the new growth on the stems. And again, the orchard manager had me out on a little field trip. So this is rectified because actually that orchard is no longer there.
Good job.
That was not our doing. Okay. We did not recommend that. It just happened. So the orchard is no longer there. It rectified it. The alfalfa crops around Mount Hull also get damaged from the bighorn sheep coming in and from grazing on it. For the most part, people are very tolerant of the sheep. For the folks that live at the base of Mount Hull, they have a unique problem in the sense that they can't grow a rose, they can't grow a garden. You know, the sheep come in and just they forage on it and they rip their shrubs out. But they have sheep in their backyard. How many people have sheep in their backyard? So for the most part, people are very tolerant of the sheep. They know what to expect when they're living there. The question was, what were some of the proactive measures we took with the roadkill? We trapped and reduced the herd a little bit. We put up road signs, so we purchased road signs for the DOT. We purchased them, they put them up, which was very, very kind of them. And we actually set about trapping the herd to reduce the numbers a little bit. We also increased our ewe harvest. We are the only herd, this is the only herd in the state that has a harvest of 2 ewes. But if we have 2 ewes, you have to remember the tribe has 2 ewes for matching our permits. The ewe tag, one is actually offered to youth, 15 and under. And I have never received so many great phone calls from parents and youth about what a unique opportunity it is to be able for their kid to get a bighorn sheep. And some of the best, you know, the last phone call, this year's harvest, the father called me and he has never had a better trip with his daughter than when she won this permit. And she never harvested a ewe. She got 3 shots off, but she was never able to make it happen. But they had arguably the best trip of their lives, and that was just nice to hear. So, so to rectify some of the roadkill, we did a corral trap, and the corral trap's kind of fun. We bait them in with apples and hay. Apparently they're eating those. So we get them in there, and it's not really the bars that hold them in. This is a drop curtain, and sheep will not press through what they cannot see. So this is 11 feet high of drop cloth, and it's set on a remote trigger. So the sheep come in there, we're hiding off in the distance, and we pull the trigger, and that whole tarp comes down even in the doorway entrance, and then we run up and close the door just to hold them in there. And then we work them through a series of small panels back there until we got a single sheep. The chute's never used, it's just a modified cattle corral. The chute's never used. There's a little room back there where we whittle them down to 1 sheep, and then you draw the short straw and you go in and hobble them, which is kind of fun. And you know, you look at a big ram that's in there, and you're mighty intimidated, but they're not an aggressive animal. And the rams, if you can get a hold of both horns, lift them up off their front feet, and they just go still, and then you can get them over on their side.
You're in a closet by yourself
with it. Yeah, pretty much. Don't go there, Ken. Okay. Rough. Can I say rough? So then after messing with this for a year, we actually captured him with a helicopter, a net gun operation, which went much easier on me. So, and these were relocated to the Hell's Gate Reserve to start that herd for the tribe. So the domestic dogs, this was one of those, you know, late Friday, almost ready to go home phone calls. This lady calls me. She lives on Mount Hull, and the sheep come through her pasture every day. But there was a dog. She did not recognize the dog, but the dog actually attacked this lamb, and she had the lamb in her hay shed, or it was her tack room with a little bit of hay. And I was supposed to come get it. So I'm like, all right. So I came and I got the lamb. I actually took him to the vet, and the vet was very nice. And I said, this might explain it a little better. This is an 11-foot high drop cloth. When I closed the door, I closed it so I was on the inside to shove the sheep through these little panels that are hard to see there. And when I stepped in, a ewe jumped so high, her front feet were over the top of the drop cloth. So that ewe jumped her front feet 11 feet in the air. So I called the vet, local vet, and I go, I have a bighorn sheep, a lamb. Do you have anywhere secure to keep this guy? And he said, yeah, I have a quarantine stall for horses. And I go, does it go to the ceiling? Do the walls go to the ceiling? He's like, absolutely. I'm like, perfect. So walls to the ceiling, I'm golden, right? So that was on a Friday. So I'm done. I'm waiting until Monday. Sunday afternoon, the vet calls me, come get your sheep. I'm like, whoa, what happened? And so this little guy doesn't weigh more than 30 pounds. I walk into where this quarantine stall was, and the door is a half door. So a little miscommunication going on. And so I look in there, and they have the sheep hogtied with a blanket over it. And I'm like, oh man, what happened? And the sheep's fine, don't worry. And so the sheep jumped over that door, and being a sheep, it wants to climb up high because that's what it feels safe in.
Yeah.
And so it's in the shop, okay, and it's in a very strange environment. So it starts climbing on the shelves, and it knocks everything off of the shop. This shop is connected to his dog kennel, where he kennels dogs, and to his operating rooms. And so after he was done knocking everything off the shelves, this lamb somehow walks through the dog kennel. Okay, all the dogs are penned up, so it just walks through the alleyway and gets into an operating room. And of course there's shelves and a table. Let's jump up on air. When it jumped up on the table, it actually turned on a faucet, and it flooded that operating room. Thus, Sunday, I went and got the sheep. So I released the sheep back onto the hill. It was given a clean bill of health from the vet, obviously. And I released him back up on the hill. I did ear tag the animal with one red tag. I have never seen that in the herd since. So I don't know if the stress was too much. I don't know if it made it. I actually don't know the vet went and got it. I don't think so. But with that said, even though I haven't seen it, we did a release of a ewe with a radio collar that had a green collar in 2001. And I saw it last year, and I wondered where it came from, because I had never seen it since 2001, but it had been on the hill the whole time. So just because I'm not seeing one little ear tag doesn't mean it's not there. So I have hope that this guy made it. So that's what dogs start. You know, when they start running into lambs, that's what happens. So here's Mount Hull. The rams hang out here quite often, and you can see there's sheep down below. So again, just like most of the herds throughout the state, we had the chance of pneumonia exposure. Keeping bighorn sheep away from domestic sheep and goats is the best protection against disease transmission. And we have fences anywhere, you know, throughout all of our bighorn sheep range. But again, this is Mount Hull. This is all Mount Hull. So the Omak Lake herd, it's very interesting. It's the only herd in Okanagan County, the only herd in the state I'm aware of that was actually naturally created through immigration. So back in the mid-90s, the biologist at that time, Jerry King, he swore that the Omak Lake herd came from sheep leaving the Sinlahican herd and walking down to Omak Lake. And so he says that they went down South Pine Creek, crossed the river and Highway 97 at Riverside, then went down Tunk Valley and just went straight down until he hit this remarkable habitat at Omak Lake. And there they set up shop. And you know, I talked to Jerry quite a bit about this, and I was skeptical, because Mount Hull sits right here. It's on the east side of the river, same as Omak Lake. They don't have to cross 97. They don't have to cross the river. They don't have to cross a lot of houses, a lot of yards. It's just easier to go from Mount Hull to Omak Lake. And so I'm like, why wouldn't they come from Hull? But Jerry was adamant. He watched them. He got reports the whole way, all the way down to Omak Lake. And so since then, since the mid-90s, they kind of languished. They never ever really got above 20 animals in that herd. And the tribe, 4 or 5 years ago, decided to make a big effort in their bighorn sheep. And when they were establishing the Hell's Gate Reserve, they also started doing some work in Omak Lake. And the first thing to do was to get some radio collars in the herd and do some genetic testing. And so they captured 7 animals, and 6 of them tied into the Sinlahican herd, but 1 tied into Mount Hull. I'm like, ha! So their radio collars were absolutely interesting. So here's Omak Lake, okay? Here's the Okanagan River. This is the Canadian border. The Methow would be here. That'd be Highway 20. So these dots out here was the tribal biologist testing the collar. You never deploy a collar without testing, okay? So these they're not on sheep. They don't matter. This is 1 ram on Omak Lake. And on November 14, 2010, this ram starts going north. And he stayed 1 to 3 miles east of the Okanagan River, which correlates pretty well with where the houses and where the orchards fields are. So he kind of stayed on the edge of this, and he had to cross Highway 20 here, and he made it all the way to the bighorn sheep in Mount Hull. So he left November 14th, but he was back in Omak Lake by Christmas Day.
Wow.
So, if you remember, November and December is the breeding season, so I think he had incentive. I gotta stop that. Okay. So what this tells us as managers is that the corridor, the route still is functional, and we still have genetic transfer, which is great. I have had several reports of sheep crossing Highway 20 at this location, or just east of Tenasket. The only difference is this one wore a radio collar and proved it. So that was fascinating to us, actually. So actually this spring the Colvilles actually augmented that Omak Lake herd with eight individuals from Yakima. So 8 additional sheep from Yakima. So we're hopeful that that herd will grow and expand now. That's just a capture operation, augmentation. So the Hell's Gate Reserve, this is managed by the Colville tribe. It's the newest herd in the state of Washington. They established it in 2009, 2002, 2011 from the Mount Hull herd, the Tieton herd, and the Clemens herd. In 3 years, with the number of sheep they were able to capture and with natural reproduction, they already had it up to 130 animals, which is awesome. Mount Hull, from 1977 to today, is about at 120. So their analysis, their feasibility study of the habitat before they started building the herd, before they introduced any sheep, they estimate they can have 400 sheep in that habitat, in that area. So if these guys get up to 400, they'll be mingling with Omak Lake, and we know that Omak Lake mingles with Mount Hull. So the chances of genetic exchange actually were greatly boosted by this, by developing this herd. So it was a great move. And this picture's great. It's just flying sheep. That's the net gutting operation. That's how they bring them into the ground station. So, but if you notice these special bags, their head is always up. You always keep them sternal, keep their head up, and it's the healthiest way to bring sheep in. sheep are just looking for a reason to die. And I was on a capture in Vulcan Mountain, and it was a helicopter capture, and they caught a sheep, a ram, and they radioed in. The helicopter was landing him on the ground at our ground station within 5 minutes of the capture, and he came in dead. And sometimes the stress is just too much for him. So there's a lot of precautions that go into capturing sheep, but netting them is actually the best way, the least stressful way to get them.
When they net them, do they knock them out?
Oh, when they net them, helicopter flies along. They have a net gun. It actually shoots a net. And so they get tangled in a net, and they land the helicopter, and 2 people get out and hobble the sheep. And then they put them in the bag and sling them. No roots. So the Vaso Lake herd, just north of us in British Columbia, we're pretty positive that we've had Mount Hull go to the Vaso Lake herd. I had a graduate student from British Columbia call me asking if I had any ear tags in Mount Hull, any orange ear tags, and we did. One of those showed up in the Vaso Lake herd. I have never found any evidence of Vaso Lake coming to Mount Hull though. So we know there's genetic, we know at least Mount Hull goes there. So we have Omak Lake to Mount Hull to Canada, Vaso Lake in Canada, and we have the Sinlahican going to Omak Lake. So theoretically, most of the sheep herds still intermix to some degree, even today. That's great for genetic exchange. It's kind of concerning when you get a disease outbreak. So if Mount Hull gets a pneumonia outbreak, there's a possibility Vaso Lake could have it. But Vaso Lake suffered a decline in 1999 and 2000, a pneumonia outbreak, and we didn't have it. So there was no exchange at that point. In 2010, they estimated 225 animals in the Vaso Lake herd from their surveys. Their management plan estimates they can have 400 animals as well. So there's a potential of having 2 large herds to our north and to our south that will greatly increase genetic exchange between our animals. And another neat thing, the bighorn sheep was added to their coat of arms, British Columbia coat of arms, in 1987 to represent the mainland, which I thought was pretty interesting. So their sheep actually, in the previous slides, they go from Williams Lake all the way down to the border. So they are pretty proud of their bighorn sheep. So one way that we, as an agency, derive dollars to do our helicopter surveys is we auction off a bighorn sheep permit, one for the state every year, and so does British Columbia. And the 2013 tag for British Columbia went for $250,000. So it's I told you, bighorn sheep, they're passionate. Bighorn sheep hunters are very passionate people. So that pays for a lot of helicopter survey time. So BC is very proud of their sheep, and they produce some very trophy animals as well. And because of that, you know, it's represented on their coat of arms.
What was on the right side of that coat of arms before?
I don't know, before. I don't know. The Queen? Was it the Queen? Oh man, did I say rough? Sorry if there's a Canadian here. Okay, I'm done. Okay. I'd be happy to take some questions. Nice, gentle questions. Go ahead.
So how different are the subspecies?
Not terribly. The desert.
What was the question?
Oh, the question was how different are the subspecies? And let's go back to the map a little bit. So the California and the Rockies, there's not a lot of difference. The Rockies are a little bigger, but looking at them, you wouldn't tell any physiological differences. But the deserts, these guys down here are referred as the desert subspecies, and they're a smaller sheep. I forgot to put on here, there's a doll sheep in Alaska. They're smaller and their horns are skinnier in diameter. They get just as long, but they're skinnier in diameter. So, go ahead. Can you say that again? Oh, yeah, the fencing from Highway 97A it'd be on the west side of the Columbia River from Wenatchee north. Yeah, that is for the the Spokane bighorn sheep herd, and they were having roadkill up to 10 to 12 animals a year for a number of years, which was much more significant than what we experienced on Mount Hull. So that fencing is strictly to keep the bighorn sheep off the highway. No, they're just crossing 97 there. Well, they're getting water at the river and they're eating the arborvitae that's planted in the yards. So there's water on the west side of 97. They don't need to cross, but they do. But the fence has dramatically reduced the roadkill. And one note about the Spokane herd: the Spokane herd produced was the world record sheep 3 years ago, 2 years ago. It is coveted by these hunters as well. Just a side note, that's not why the fence was there. The fence was there to protect the herd. No, it was occurring year-round. Yeah.
You know, you show them the into people habitat. So is there any indication that as we allow more people into the forested areas of Mount Hall with recreational people, cars, whatever, that impacts the herd at all?
Oh yeah, even creating a new trail system. Yeah, there isn't. Oh, sorry. There was a lot of pictures, especially in Mount Hull, where the bighorn sheep were near houses, integrated near humans. And if we add more human disturbance, off-road vehicle, ATVs, are we impacting the herd? Yes, yes we are.
So, on that note, not all.
Yes, on that note, Mount Hull is a big ATV area. One thing Mount Hull has going for it, for the bighorn sheep, I don't think I have a good picture. So this is Mount Hull. This is the sheep habitat on Mount Hull. And so from 97 going east, Mount Hull is a series of benches. There's a cliff, a bench, usually a ravine, another cliff, a bench, a ravine, and on and on and on. And the ATVs, there are no roads in these benches. You physically can't put a road there. And so the orchards and everything are right along Highway 97. And then you have the sheep habitat of benches. And then once you get up past all those benches, up on the plateau on the top, where it is more forested, where the sheep don't occur anyway because of the forest land, that's where the roads are, and that is where the ATVs are. What we have right now is there's a new trail system put into Mount Hull, and that seems to be giving some disturbance to bighorn sheep, but not a lot. I'm not terribly concerned about it. What was that? As of yet. As of yet, I'm not terribly concerned.
Because disease from goats and sheep is such a problem, has there ever been an attempt to restrict the type of animals that people can have adjacent to these herds?
No. We do not restrict, apparently, yeah, we don't restrict the right for somebody to own a sheep or goat and to live next to Mount Hull. But we try and educate them. In some cases, there's the Federation of North American Wild Sheep. It's a group created by sportsmen that do a lot of great work for bighorn sheep. There has been cases where they have actually bought out a landowner's sheep. They've bought them on private just private parcels, and they bottom out on Forest Service range allotments as well. And so we don't restrict the ability to own a domestic, but we do educate, and we do have, there has been instances where they've been bought out. Go ahead.
Do you think the Methow Valley will see bighorn sheep either naturally or by reintroduction at any point?
Probably not a reintroduction, but naturally, if the Chelan Butte herd keeps coming up, then I can see them, you know, north of the terrace, in the lower reaches of this valley, but probably not up here. Your winters are pretty severe, regardless of your habitat. So, go ahead. It's more like a deer's hair than a wool. It's not a wool like we would think of a domestic. It's more of a hair. So, and it's very coarse like a deer. Man, who do I start with? The lady with the black vest.
I noticed that you use the word harvest with
Yes.
respect to sheep.
Yes.
Is that something that your department's telling you? I mean, basically, we're talking about killing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hunter harvest. Yeah.
It's not a crop that anyone has grown and then they harvest it.
Right.
Where does that word, why do you use it?
Apparently my Washington State University education. I don't know. No, nobody has ever told me to use a different word or to use harvest instead of kill. It's what I use.
That's the word.
Nobody has told me what to say. It's just what I use. For those who do not know, when I do say hunter harvest, they are killing the sheep. Okay? Yes, they do eat the sheep, and I have been told that sheep is pretty tasty. Yes.
Two questions. One is, do any of the pack animals, the domesticated pack animals, when they go out, do they have an effect on the pneumonia when they transmit? And two, are there any sheep, when you hike over the sawtooth over to Stevens, is there a possibility to see any over that way?
Yeah, that's the Manson herd. Once you get over to the North Shore of Lake Chelan, that's the Manson herd.
Repeat the question, please.
Sorry. Two questions. Do pack animals have the ability or the concern of transmitting disease to our sheep? And then the second question is, when you go over the sawtooths, is there ability to see sheep on that side? And yes, on the North Shore of Lake Chelan, when you get over the sawtooths, is the Manson herd. And they're down lower along the lake. It's a fairly robust herd, so you have the ability to see. You can see them as you boat up the lake as well. As far as pack animals transmitting disease to sheep, yeah, that's starting to be a concern. Domestic goats are definitely being used as pack animals. And I was in the eastern Pasayten up on the top of Armstrong Mountain, and these goats came up, and I was really surprised. You know, goats with backpacks. I'm like, what is that? And so, and you know, then came the people. They're not leashed. The pack animal owners say that they are bonded to the to them. I consider it bonded. They better have a leash on that thing. But there is the ability of transmission from goats, any domestic goat to any wild sheep. What we've done as an agency, we have had pack goat owners approach the agency and want to volunteer to do volunteer work, you know, throughout the state. And we say no when they want to use their pack goats in an area where we have sheep. So we say no, you cannot bring you can volunteer, but we don't want you bringing your goats. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, but the other animals don't have impact? I mean, I don't know.
I have not seen a pack sheep yet. So. No, as far as a llama, no, it's goat and sheep that are the concern. Way in the back, waving his hand.
All right, so far you've identified 6 herds in the state of Washington, ballpark 500 max maybe that you've identified for animals in the state of Washington, which we know we can drive 10 hours east to west, 6, 8 hours north to south. So we've got 500 or 600 of these. At what point does Fish and Game Wildlife feel that maybe they don't need to issue hunting permits anymore, and that maybe 500 animals in our entire state probably don't deserve licenses issued, matched or unmatched amongst the tribes?
Oh, okay. There's my presentation just focused on the sheep herds around Okanagan. We have many more sheep herds in the state than what I discussed here.
Okay, how about our county? 500 sheep in our entire county is a whole lot less deer and everything else that you issue cougar. There are more cougar in Okanagan County, I'm sure, than that. So just wondering, do you have a number where you're picking and choosing how many licenses?
Okay, how we develop our hunting season or our hunting permits. Each individual herd has a management plan. In that management plan, there's a population objective. Okay, and that's set up by